Hello, everybody. Welcome to another day of Look Into the Glass. Of course, we have Jeselle and me, and today we have Liliana Lucine, and she is somebody who is a men's mental health advocate, number one. She does quite a few different things, and we're just going to go ahead and let's get in and get into the subject. It's more of you're a person that stands up for men's rights and the things that where women are being recognized and men the help for men is not being recognized and not being
Yeah,
so kind of put that in a confusing way, but hey, I got it out there.
thank you.
So what they were talking about, or we were talking about before we jumped into this recording, was that we've been seeing a lot of Liana's things coming across on like our YouTube and everything. We're watching them, and one of the things that we watched, well, Sela watched yesterday, was about go ahead and what was
Yeah, I'll go ahead. It was
changing
about
roles.
consent. It was about
Yeah,
consent, and in that consent and how you change the gender, the how we end up changing the rules and how that
yeah,
is so not fair. How it's basically stating, it was imagine you're a woman and you're laying there asleep and you wake up to your partner being advancing and doing things. Well, how is that
hmm
going to be perceived? Well, it's crossing boundaries. But if it's a man who wakes up to his wife who is
yeah,
being advanced in the same exact way, our
yeah,
society says for the man, woohoo for him. He's getting what he wants. That I
yeah,
want to be woke up that way, when in
yeah,
all reality, he may not be in that place. He may be in the same mind frame as well women would be. And then how unethical and everything other ways it is that these men are, it's not being, you change the gender and you absolutely change the stereotype.
yeah. And I don't think sometimes we realize that. I don't think we mean to be unfair, but we just don't realize that we are giving very different rules to both genders. So we've
Yes.
finally recognized that it is not okay to touch a woman when she doesn't consent, when she doesn't want it, or if she's asleep, or if she's had too much to drink, etc. We recognize this now. Whereas many years ago, perhaps we were not good at recognizing that. We've got better. But
Mhm.
we still don't seem to be recognizing it for men. Like you say, if a man tells another man, typically, oh, my wife, tried to, start sexual activity with me whilst I was asleep, they're like, well, hey, you're lucky, good for you, your wife still, is into you, etc., etc., and they get a pat on the back. No one stops to think that perhaps maybe he didn't want to. People seem to assume that men always want sex in any form, in any shape, and at any time, and we don't give them the same choice that we're giving women. And like you say, it's this laughter, it's this joke, it's this pat on the back. And we just treat both genders very, very differently when
We
it
do.
comes to certain situations.
We
We
absolutely
absolutely do. Um, and one thing that's like popping into my head, and this is something I've been seeing so consistently, is and then this is not targeting anybody, but situations with kids, how kids are taken from the father and given to the mother, and the father's given no rights. And that is, and they always give them, and like in the United States, they
Hmm
consistently, we call them mother states because they favor
Right.
the mother no matter what, no matter the
Yeah.
situation. The mother could be loving and caring, and the father can be loving and caring, but the mother's going to have full rights over the kids. And they're going to
Yeah.
deem the father as unloving, and and call him names, and it's
not as
fearsome.
important. It's that they're
Mm.
deeming him as not as important when that role
Yeah.
is absolutely crucial to a
Mm.
healthy individual, adult individual.
Yeah.
Nevada is one of those mother states where the mother can be a person that is literally not being being very neglectful, this and that. We've seen it
Right.
so many times throughout the years, and even personal life. Somebody that I know went in to try to change the laws, right?
Right.
And this is the where the corruption really comes in, and people kind of really need to understand is, so somebody I know went in to change the laws because he was facing the same thing, and all he wanted was for that when the father and the mother standing in front of the judge, that they're standing there as equal individuals as a parent over those children, right?
Mm,
So what they did is, while they were doing all the voting, they went and
hmm
I'm sorry, the person was listening, and they went ahead and vetoed it and then passed it.
Wow.
So they went ahead and said, no, we don't want that, but then we're going to pass it. So it was this, why not? What is so wrong with having the father and the mother standing and having equal rights to
Yes.
those children, and equal, and knowing that their value is equal in that child's life or those children's life, the equality in that.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think we're so used to looking at it a certain way, we're not even challenging it sometimes. We're not even realizing it, that we treat the gender so differently when it comes to parenting. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there has to be so many other things, like mental health. We speak about how women being, mental health for women, but it's
Mm,
not, we speak about it a lot here, men's mental health, but we don't, but everywhere else you look, you don't see it as much. Nobody really
mm,
recognizes it. The men have to be strong, and men
yep.
have to,
Yep.
carry the weight of the family. And
Yeah.
that I can't even imagine.
And sometimes I feel that people are almost blaming men because, well, they don't talk about it. If they talked about their feelings like women do, then they'd be better off. Now, that's one way of dealing with your issues, is to talk about it. But you need to talk about it when you're ready and to the
Mm-hmm.
right person. And you certainly can't victim blame somebody saying, well, it's your fault you're unwell because you're not talking about your problems. Well, let's think about why not. Maybe it's the reaction they get. And I think this is part of the problem. When men do try to share their feelings or their experiences, they are often mocked or laughed at or dismissed or belittled. So that really could be part of the problem. So maybe we shouldn't be blaming them for not talking, and think, well, let's set up a world, a society, an environment where they feel they can actually talk and they will be heard and taken seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I will admit this. My husband, for the longest I would always, talk about what's going on with me, but I would never, listen to him or try to switch it to um where it's not as important, if that and
Mm,
over the years I realized I was doing that. I was like, that's not fair to him. And
mm,
so now, like, I'm like, you can talk to me. I'm not going to react. I'm not, let's talk about this. Let's be two adults and just talk about it. That way you can feel safe and feel like you have a place. I'm listening to you and
mm.
hearing you out on things and not just going to be reactive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got so used to women talking about their problems. Sometimes we just don't even think about men in the same way, do we? And like I
No, I
say,
know.
sometimes there's no malice in it. There's no, we're
Mm-mm.
not sort of
No.
trying to shut them out. We just don't even realize, I think sometimes.
And that's the
Uh,
saddest part, is that we're just not even realizing. So it's going so over or under the radar that
Yep.
it's turned into an epidemic in men's
Mm,
mental health all around. If we want to start talking, you go off. You've on some of your videos, you've said a lot of statistic numbers
mm,
in the UK, but this
yeah.
is around the world. I believe that
Yeah.
men's suicide is
Yeah.
skyrocketed compared to
Mm,
women's.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to even compare them, because, like you said, the goal
Mm,
isn't to take away from the support that women have, but to
yeah.
only add to some kind of support that men have. You were giving off some statistics on men's like battered shelters.
Mm,
What's out there for women and what's out
yeah.
there for men, and
Yeah.
that really hit me hard. Those
Yeah.
numbers are just so far apart that
Mm.
it is they being unrecognized completely.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think perhaps when if there was more in sort of films and TV series and books to change the picture we have in our minds of an abused
Right.
person, we wouldn't just always picture a battered woman. We might picture a man, but some people will almost laugh in disbelief when you talk about an abused man, an abused husband.
He wasn't
Because
tough
I've never
enough.
seen it, I've never heard of it, no one talks about it, and it's very hard to think something's real when you haven't seen some form of example of it or heard people talking. And I think what's interesting as well, something I've heard from many, many men now over the years, is that not only is it difficult to speak for themselves, but it's difficult to speak for each other. So, for example, women can speak about the difficulties women face, but if they said, well, if I try to talk about the difficult times that men have, people shout me down. They're like, "Ugh, men, you have it easy. You have everything. You're the dominant sex. What are you worried about? Women are the ones who are victims. Women are the ones who are suffering. Stop pulling the focus away. You're fine." And that's the reaction that they get when they do try to speak up for men in general. So I think that when I've spoken about it in any of my training sessions or at talks, etc., I think that's why men have been so receptive and so grateful, because of that. Great, maybe somebody will listen to you because we can't speak for ourselves because we're men, and they just say, no, shut up, go away.
Yeah, I do have to say that there is a much more receptiveness when it's coming from a woman's mouth than when it is coming from a man's mouth. And it's like you said, it's the same exact thing being
Mm,
said in the exact same manner, but you change the gender and it
yeah,
changes the people and their stereotypes in their
yeah.
minds. And it really absolutely changes the reactions. And
Mm,
uh how I was going with that. That's where I
yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah.
That's where I went.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, and yet still, I think I've had a lot of positive reactions, although there have been some people who still, despite, what we've been talking about, there's still a lot of hatred towards all men, I think, because they've been hurt so badly themselves and they know other women who've been hurt so badly. And they're just lumping all men into the same pot. And because they've had very bad experiences with some awful men, they're just then thinking all men are bad, all men are
Which could
dangerous,
have
all
to
men are
do with their
predators.
own patterns and not the man. Sorry, I just
Maybe,
want to put that out.
maybe. It's possible. It's possible. And I think it's just so awful that male victims out there, again, just feel that they can't speak up because already before they say a word, they're automatically bad because they're a man. They're automatically dangerous because they're a man. So all of these labels are just placed on them, which are so negative and so heavy when they haven't necessarily done anything wrong. And this is what I don't like to see. It's when you hate either gender for no good reason. And we're talking, you're hating half the planet. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. And it's just so unfair to hate a whole gender because of one group of them who have behaved so appallingly.
Now, I know that you have a book and what does your book cover?
Yeah, so Men Ignored is the truth about male victims of sexual assault and harassment. So it's everything we've been talking about. It's about men's experiences. So for the last sort of 15 years, I've sort of been gathering very precious stories and experiences that men have shared with me, either personally as friends, families, or colleagues, or in my training sessions as delegates or students. And there's all these sort of stories speckled throughout the book about what they've gone through and the reactions they've received when they've tried to tell people about their experience, and it's been overwhelmingly negative. So I just talk about society's ideas about victims and about genders and how men seem to have just got absolutely not just lost but pushed out.
Wow. One of the things that we have been wanting to do on here is like a panel for sexual assault victims because there's so many of them. It's it's appalling. But
Mm,
one of the things that we keep trying to point out is having a male come out and speak about it. whether it's, keeping identity, I completely understand. We do not, if some people just don't want their faces all over there, especially because the lash, the lash factor they're gonna
Backlash.
get from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so sad, isn't it? We seem more comfortable accepting a woman as a victim than we do a man.
So
With-
I'm going to be straight out honest. When we first started thinking about this panel, for me, all I was thinking about was women victims at the very beginning. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, we're missing half of the society out there. And we're missing half of the society that really, really, really are struggling because they can't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So, and so that's when we both were like, wait a minute, we need to stretch this panel out to men also because, it happens at young ages. It can happen at any time and throughout their life, just the same as
Mhm.
it can for females.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is so hard for them because they are even less likely to talk than women. Certainly in the UK, about a third of victims of sexual assault, if they're female, will never tell a single soul as long as they live. Not the police, not a haven or a hospital, doctor, nobody. Yet for men, it's twice that. So it's almost double. So, at least two-thirds of male victims will never tell anyone. So even that sort of indicates to us just how hard they find it to speak up and to speak out. And I've spoken to other good people like yourselves who have tried to get male victims to speak to them, but it's really, really difficult.
It is, I think it's just allowing them being in that vulnerable state again. Sorry, I have my seizure dog
Mm.
barking at the door. Hold on.
I know that one of the things that we've discussed is that you have been in the around the police force where you've been able to see firsthand how the response is. What is that like when you're witnessing that?
Yeah, so I started in the Metropolitan Police Service in London in the UK in 2001. So it's a long time ago now. It's about 25 years when I started, and I was there for 18 years. I did various roles, but in the Metropolitan Police, when I started, you always start as a response officer going to emergency calls, what you would call 911 calls. So I attended a lot of domestic incidents. And I admit at that age when I joined, I think I had images in my head of what a domestic incident would look like. It'd be a female victim and a male suspect or male perpetrator. And that's what I was expecting. But it became clear very quickly that actually domestic abuse comes in all different shapes and sizes and colors and cultures. It really does.
Mhm.
Sometimes I dealt with same gender couples. Sometimes I dealt with where the female was the perpetrator, all different ages, all ranges of different control and abuse involved. So I was seeing that it can happen to anyone. But I think the only thing that was filtering through to, let's say, our media, our TV, our films, our stories, our books, our talks on television, the only thing filtering through was that one example of a female victim and a male perpetrator, and that was the only one coming through. But it certainly wasn't the reality that I was seeing.
Wow. I can't even imagine seeing that and the reality, the wake up call for us, and
Mm.
seeing the wide range of going, no, that anybody can be the perpetrator, anybody can,
Yes.
it's out there.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
being, I want to say it's more of a conditioning of it saying it's always going to be the man.
Mm. And the other thing that surprised me, which I wasn't expecting, was that sometimes I dealt with couples where they were equally abusive to each other. There wasn't one dominant person, which again was the stereotype that I had in my head. They were
Um,
both equally, because we would, separate them and speak to them individually, take histories, etc., and we
Yeah.
would investigate and look for other evidence. And yet they were both equally abusive. And that again surprised me. But that's when you really get into the psychology of, why two people come together, why they stay together, why you get these toxic relationships over and over again.
we cover a lot of those because we
Yeah,
Yeah,
personal experiences here.
yeah, 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 yeah.
the addicted to chaos is where we come into that. It with a chemical, the dopamine feel that we get from it brings us
Mm,
right back to it. And so even if you left one person, you find another, you end up finding that chaos in that person, and then you
yes,
two just create that chemical, and you're like, oh, I feed
that's
off of
right.
this.
That's right. That's right. And I think where it went wrong in policing years ago, I'm hoping that it's improved since I've left. I left in 2019, was that we would attend, and even when you got two parties that were equally abusive, let's say a man and a woman in a couple, the expectation was for you to arrest the man rather than the woman, because there's no way she could be equally as abusive
Oh,
mentally or
the
physically.
starter.
Yeah, which again was just so, so wrong. And that also at one point, I remember we were advised that if they both had injuries, we arrest the one who caused the more serious injury, which doesn't make sense in law at all, because the law says if you've both caused an injury, you can both be arrested, and that would be equal and fair. You shouldn't just arrest one and not the other. And there are ways of dealing with people. You take them to separate stations and you deal with them separately, etc. But so that was interesting that policing, the procedures, the perceptions were still quite old fashioned at points. And even the advice we were given was old fashioned and wrong.
Yeah, and then how do you, it leaves you in the more of the situation of the how can I put this? Each individual experience could be really mishandled because of the person with the more injuries is the one that you take in or whatever, when that's not necessarily, that could have been just full self-defense. Because I mean, I know we're talking about
That's right.
men, and I know we're talking about men, but in my own personal experience, I've had to, in defense, in order to
Mm,
live,
yes,
create it, pain and injury upon the
absolutely.
other person,
Yep.
and I know that's got to go both ways,
Yes.
that absolutely, when you're in those situations. So I can
Mm,
imagine just how awry these domestic cases are
mm,
being mishandled,
yeah.
misvalued, miss everything. And
Yeah.
then you've got the perpetrator walking along dancing free, and the one who's actually the starter, and the one that, because a lot of times reactive abuse, you know um
Yeah.
is where it happens a lot too. And that the person that's the re, you know the reactor or whatever is the one that's punished, when it's
Yeah.
literally their flight or fight.
Yeah. And that's literally when I was a police trainer teaching recruits. It was so vital to get across that you can't make assumptions. You
Yeah.
have to investigate. You have to ask questions. You really cannot jump to conclusions. And you've got to be really careful of any unconscious bias that you have when you're dealing with people.
Don't you don't think of that goes into it in that happens on this side, because I've never dealt with police work, but on this side you don't think that it's something you have to teach.
Yeah. Yeah, but you really do. I mean, we taught that quite a lot. Because like I say, these are, human beings here,
Yeah.
in this line of work, and all lines of work. As human beings, we can be biased without even realizing it, can't we? So that's why I think training is so important, to make people sort of self-aware of what they're thinking and how they're making their decisions.
Wow. You know, I had a question and it totally dissipated from my mind. Um, when it comes to uh how do let me ask this, how do we help men feel more comfortable, or do you know how we can help men feel more comfortable with coming forward and being able to talk, giving them the safe space? Like, how do other women come across this without us turning it into, because I know there's women out there who are going to be like, oh, that's such that's loads, like that's not true. Or I know that there's going to be women out there that's going to say that it's that men are not capable of being sexually assaulted or anything of that. But how can we, who believe in that, keep a safe space for them and help them feel safer?
Yeah, I think there's different environments. So I think it can start with schools. I think certainly when we are talking about issues around sort of sex education, rather than always thinking about women are always victims or girls are always victims, we've got to be very careful about how we talk about victims and genders there. So we can start at school. We can start as parents around sort of how we talk. We don't just talk to our daughters about dangers and about being safe. We talk to our sons as well in the same way. So it's how we parent. I think the training that we give in the workplace is important as well. So managers understand that they need to be open and receptive and supportive to both genders, and they mustn't sort of be blinkered just one way or the other and make these same assumptions. And I think it would be lovely when there are men who feel they are able to share their stories, that they can, whether that's on TV programs or in films or in books, because the more we hear about other people's experiences, the more that will change the images that we have in our head, and the more we'll understand that it is real and it does happen and it is out there, and we'll be less sort of disbelieving of it, which is what we keep coming across.
And so
Yeah.
basically help us help normalize it a little bit better because,
Mm,
because seeing it everywhere for women, it's normalized into our culture now. And we recognize it a whole lot more. Where,
yeah.
yeah, with men, I can see how it's not as normalized. I'm looking back from when I had to do workplace little, harassment things, and it spoke about how women don't say things like this to girls, and these kinds of things are not funny. And
Mm,
now I'm like, we don't really target men in that. Like saying something very
mm,
awkward to a guy, and whether it comes off funny or not, I can see how a guy can kind of just ha 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 and walk away. And
yeah.
it definitely brings it to light.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it's in every sort of aspect. I mean, when the Me Too movement happened, which was just wonderful, that was so great for women. I was waiting for more male victims to come forward as well. There were some. There were a couple of sort of celebrities in there who were brave enough to share their experiences, which I thought was really, really good. But I was hoping that maybe there'd be more and there'd be that same support for men. But it didn't really happen. And I think as the years went by, I kept waiting and waiting to hear these conversations. But again, they just never really materialized, which I thought was very sad. So I think it'd be great if there were more advocates for male victims, and then we would get some momentum and we would get some support around it, and then more people would feel comfortable sharing.
I agree with that. I know that there was one thing that one documentary that came out, and it was more of it targeted more of childhood
Hmm.
shows, but it was a male that came forward, and he was one of the biggest parts of it. And even after he spoke out about it, there was a lot of backlash on him, and a lot of people. I remember seeing a lot of the negative comments towards him, and how there was friendships that that dissolved, that are now currently resolved, but in those
Mm,
moments a lot of them dissolved. And it was really sad to see it. And I remember telling my husband, so that's so mean, that's so, I don't know why people are so negative towards it. This is the
yeah,
experience he went through, that he had to endure.
mm,
And being somebody who has been on that side and going, who's going to believe me? And here
yeah,
he is coming forth, internet, probably globally, and now is facing all this backlash. And then I
yeah.
can't even imagine what he was going through, what he was facing mentally after that.
Yeah, just awful. And it's going to put other victims off coming forward as well, isn't it? When they see that. Um,
Absolutely. It's going to deter. It's going
yeah,
to only create more of an epidemic because, well, I mean, when you get backlashes like, expected the hate talk and the joking, I think is where it gets me the most, is when the men will throw in the little joking jabs. They're
mm,
literally jabs. You can tell that they're jabs, and it's like, why? Just why?
mm,
This is somebody that you should be understing it just as much as them, on the fact
yeah,
that you don't have very many people out there going, hey, men over here, we can help. Hey, men, safe place for men over here.
Yeah.
You would think that you would be supporting, and you're not.
Yeah, it's interesting why and when these things change. I mean, for example, I'm a woman going through menopause right now, and it's quite pleasing for me to see there's a lot of talk about it now in the media, a lot of famous people talking and supporting it. Now, this was not true 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It did
No.
not exist. These conversations were not here, and women were going through it alone, again, being dismissed and left alone to suffer with some very severe symptoms. Uh, and then if we talk about female victims of sexual assault, abuse and harassment, you wind the clock back 30 years, it was a very, very different experience for them. So it's wonderful when these things change and progress, but it's quite fascinating looking at what needs to happen. Some perfect storm needs to come together to actually bring about this change. And this is what we need for male victims. We need this perfect storm. We need people to speak out. We need advocates. We do need maybe some sort of big names to step forward, not necessarily sharing their own experience, but just supporting male victims and making it okay for them to speak without being ridiculed.
I think that is something. It's a start at least for those who have faced some kind of, you know, not just with sexual assaults, but with domestic violence. I really think that, domestic violence is another thing that they don't see. Like we said, it's always the male that's the perpetrator.
This.
And yeah,
Yeah,
these are the two topics that I can see that it hasn't changed over the years, and it's still very
yeah,
what they consider taboo and not a very good conversation. And because even with sexual assaults for women, it's still a taboo conversation, but it's come forth quite a bit. But
yeah.
men, it's really not talked about. And I love that what you're doing here. I love that you're willing to be that and come on and open up the eyes of going, hey, here's the bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the reason I feel very strongly about it for a lot of reasons, but the reason I feel very safe and secure in saying it is because the number of men who I've spoken to have shared their stories with me, over the last sort of, 15, 20, 25 years, innumerable men. So I know I have all of them behind me. I have all of their stories in my pocket, in my heart, held very, very precious. So feel like I have all the evidence. I know it's true. I know it's real. This isn't just an opinion or something
Mhm.
I've plucked out of thin air. I've heard it from real people again and again and again, and it's just absolutely undeniable.
It also comes, another thing to shed the light on it is this is why men's suicide is a lot higher than women's suicide. Men's
Yeah.
suicide, the rates are a lot higher. We just before we did this recording with you, we had a friend of ours who has helped us into this podcasting world. He is a suicide survivor and a men's mental health advocate, and we absolutely adore what he's doing and the work that he's doing. And you know, and he talks about it. And the more that we do this, the more we're seeing it's. I've lost multiple friends. My husband lost a friend to suicide. We lost a friend of ours, his father, to suicide. And I see more and more men compared to the women. And in
Mm.
my own personal world, having, I think that we really do need to open up and be more loving in that area for men and let
Yeah.
them see that it's okay to be vulnerable. I really do think it starts with children.
Yeah.
Because I've always seen children be told, little boys be told, you have to be no crying, you shouldn't cry, you have to be tough all the time,
Yeah.
you're not
Which
supposed to be
makes no
sensitive.
sense. It's you're talking to a child,
Yeah.
and there we are again. Change the gender, and you're changing the stereotype, and you're changing the situation. It's still a child, whether
Yes.
male or female. It's still a child coming to you in a vulnerable way, crying, and you need to listen and support and be empathetic and do what you're supposed to do as an adult.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, you know.
Exactly. We think we're teaching children, especially boys, to be strong by holding it in, when
We're
in fact it's
not.
the opposite, isn't it?
It
If you
is.
teach somebody how to manage their emotions,
Mhm.
that's how you teach them how to cope. I don't know what's happening in the States, but certainly in the UK schools, what I've been seeing in recent years is that they're trying to help children by letting them out of the classroom when they're suffering, when they're feeling bad. But that's teaching them to avoid what they're feeling and to avoid dealing with it. And I'd much rather they focus on teaching them how to cope than teaching them how to hold up a little red card and
Or
just leave and
giving,
walk away and sit in a room on their own all day.
yeah, or giving them the tools, different types of tools. There's all
Yes.
kinds of immediate tapping therapy, all kinds of different things that we can use and utilize
Yeah.
in the schools for an immediate kind of self-regulation to teach these kids, and we're not. We
Yeah.
have
And I,
it's the same thing in the United States. We're not. I
yeah.
mean, I don't know where, like in my school district, they're not doing necessarily the red hold up the red flag,
Mm.
but they absolutely are not giving or preparing children or helping children through, because in the school that's a whole nother world for them. That's a
Yeah.
whole life that they're living there that we know very little about as
Yeah.
parents or as adults. I mean, we
Yeah.
remember when we were there, but like that was so many years ago, so we only have
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the realization that these kids are living in this real time, and we aren't.
Yeah. And I think we're treating sort of mental ill health as just sort of a minority. It's a problem. It'll occur and we just sort of separate them off or separate that kid off, or they've got an issue. They
Yes.
don't have to do anything. Rather than really, it should be part of the curriculum. Psychology should be part of their education. Let's talk about anxiety. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What do you do if you feel anxious? What do you do if your friend is having a panic attack? So they're not so scared of it. And so they
Yes.
know what to do, and at least they can name it and they know how to describe it and ask for help about it. But I think, like I say, it's still quite a lot of taboo. Oh, we mustn't talk about depression, mustn't talk about anxiety. But these are the two most common, mental ill health disorders experienced around the world. We're all so likely to experience some form of anxiety or depression in our life. It's
Mm.
something that we should be talking about openly and learning about from a young age, I think.
I, lo- I, lo-
Absolutely.
I love your idea in adding that into curriculum. That is like, yeah, I mean, me personally, I'm not going to go way into a tangent because I can. When it comes to education here in the States, and the public education system here in the States, especially with my particular school district. But they really don't. They separate the children, and it's being shown even through social media, where people, big influencers, are showing up at schools going, why are you separating this kid that's getting picked on, instead
Mm,
of like getting the kids that are picking on him. No, you're having
mm,
this kid leave 15 minutes early, and it was this little boy that's getting picked on, so now you're teaching this kid that he's the problem when he
yes.
is not. You're telling
Yeah.
him you've got to run away from from bullies because they don't agree with who you are, or whatever you represent, or whatever is going on in their
Yeah.
kid life. But and then you need to look into the bully's life. What's going on there?
Yes.
Why are they doing those things? You know?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's once we grow up and we start understanding each other more and we become more empathetic, we can see how wrong it was what went on at school. But it shouldn't take that long, really, for us to see that and to realize that by that time, some of the
Yeah, by
damage has
that.
been done.
Yeah, because you're talking sometimes it's 15, 20, 30 years, and
Yeah.
then that person or those people are carrying that this entire time, you know.
Mm, yeah.
Oh,
It's absolutely astonishing to hear it and go, and even with right now, like the self recognition with it all, it's like, wow. I never really thought of it that way. I never really seen it that way. With the schools, I will say that when I was in school, it's been 10 years since I've graduated, but um, I will say that there was never a recognition of going, hey, are you like, I'm having a bad mental health day. I'm not feeling like myself. Where do we go? Well, you can go to the counselor. Well, I don't want to talk to that person. I don't feel comfortable talking to this
Mm.
person. And even though sometimes if you are, they don't make the right decisions. They'll, oh, I'm having a bad, say, things are going on at home in a certain way. Not that it's bad for me. It's just, oh, there's a lot of pressure. Well, they're gonna call, somebody else, an expert, and they come
Yes.
in
One of
and they
those
just make things
three-letter
worse.
agencies. One of those
Yeah.
three-letter agencies and make things worse. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And this is why, sorry, go on.
and then now the whole situation has gone into this absolute catastrophic traumatic experience that's going on for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why kids turn to social media, because they're
Mhm.
looking for a community, for help and support, to know that they're not alone in what they're thinking and feeling.
Mhm.
And of course, there's great pros to social media, but as we know, there's also great cons to it as well. And now, of course, people are turning to AI because we can't all afford a therapist. So people are speaking to AI, and a lot of people speak wonderfully about it. They say, wow, it's fantastic. I finally get to talk about my problems, and this person's always there. 24 hours a day. They don't get fed up with me. I don't have to worry about wearing out, my welcome and running out of sympathy. So it's interesting to see how the world is changing and where people are
Mhm.
going for support.
I want to touch on the what you said right there at the end, where people feel like they're wearing out the sympathy and their welcome of being of
Human.
needing some kind of support. That alone in itself, for people to feel that as a person who has seizure disorders and has things that always that fought the burden feeling, you know, that in itself is an absolute torture. To think
Mm,
that you can't go to a human being, someone that you really want to, or to think that that person doesn't have a human being or a
mm,
place that they have to go to a software system,
yeah,
to get the help or to get the comfort or the validation that they're
mm,
that they're seeking. That's just that right there. And that, I'm sorry, that really struck me really hard when you said those
yeah,
words, because I
yeah,
want people to understand that that is where people are at, you
yeah.
know?
And it's an unfortunate part of the human condition that when we are, um, anxious or depressed or sad, going through something terrible, we sort of need to say it over and over and over again. It's not like TV where somebody sort of gets it out once, have a good cry, and then they're all fixed.
Right?
Life doesn't happen like that. We need to say it over and over and over. So I really understand with some couples and with some families how that can be difficult, because the loved one is hearing the other person said again and again and again. And I think, well, I've said it all. I've given all the advice. I'm at a loss. I don't know what more to do. So I think them almost as a carer as well. They can be experiencing real difficulty because they want to help, but they sort of run out, or they can't, or they don't know what else to do.
Other than just maybe listen.
Yes. Yeah.
Something other than just maybe listen. Sometimes
Yeah.
advice, as much as you want to give it, sometimes it is unwarranted. Sometimes it is they just need that ear. Literally,
Mm.
just give them a few
Yeah.
minutes. And
Yeah.
I know with me, that's how it's always been with me. I just need that few minutes because I'm going through all of this all over again. And I need those few minutes to just blur it out.
Present.
And then I'm like, okay. And typically I can manage myself, get it through my own head and start processing,
Yeah.
and if I'm capable of doing it, men are capable of doing the same thing.
Yeah. And that's it. Sometimes it's telling somebody what you need and how you need it. and just say, look, at the end of the day, I need to come home and vent, or it's all going to sit there and fester and I'm going to get really angry or really upset or really ill. So just listen to me for half an hour while I get it all off my chest, and then I'll be okay. So it is about describing or telling somebody what we need from them.
Mhm. Absolutely. The vulnerability and the communication uh, are definitely the things that are the key there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
this has been, oh, go ahead, Sal.
I just want to have one more question for you, and this is I kind of saw this on your on the profile I saw with you. One question that really stood out to me was, as a man, seeing all these campaigns for women, everything that women, home shelters, you got the Me Too, all of that. What do you feel that does to them? What does that do to them?
Yeah.
Have
Yeah,
any of them
I
spoke
think,
out?
yeah, I mean, and they've said to me, they just really feel that they can't speak out because people will be angry with them. How dare you? You know, women need help. Female victims need help. They need shelters. They need support. They need groups. They need action. How dare you? Like they're taking sort of support away or taking the limelight away. And I think a lot of men feel that they really can't come forward. And there aren't very many male support groups, and there aren't very many male shelters. And some people will say in reaction to that, they'll say, well, but there doesn't need to be. Look at the proportions. There are more women, so there should be more shelters. And there are more women, so there should be more female support groups. But it doesn't equate. We know that male victims are significantly underreport. We suspect that the number of male victims is far, far higher than anyone realizes. So I don't think you can say, oh, well, they're only 10%, because they're really not. We think they're about 40% of domestic abuse victims. We think that there's far more, at least 12,000 men a year in the UK who are raped. So we think that actually the numbers are astonishingly high and even higher than
Probably,
perhaps putting together.
yeah, probably are even higher than what they're putting together because the men are going to diminish that as much as possible, especially when it comes to being sexually assaulted. They're
Yeah,
going to diminish that as much as possible on their own, just to
yeah,
themselves, and that's a sad, 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 and dark place to be.
absolutely. So I think it is especially hard for men to come forward, and they see all this support for women. And whilst it's wonderful, I think to them it sort of sends them a message. Well, nobody's talking about me.
Mhm.
Nobody's talking about male victims, so it's not okay for me to speak up and to speak out.
Wow. One thing I do want to get out there is your book. Where can we find it, and others who want to read it?
Yeah, so my book Men Ignored is on Amazon. You can find it there, and there's a link on my website at Lucine Training. But also on my website, there are free resources for male victims. So there's lots of information they can download that can hopefully help them.
We'll make sure
That
we
was
put
my
that
other
on the show
question.
notes.
I
Yeah.
was gonna ask that one too. I was like, okay, so what? Where else if they need help? Um, we do
Yeah,
know there are resources in here in Texas, in Dallas, specifically the Hear My Cry Foundation. It's a
Mhm.
right.
suicide prevention. But they do have. I know that when we had the founder of the foundation, she told us about how there's meetings in Dallas with men's meetings. So it's only for men, so they can have a time where they can um, talk and have a place of vulnerability with other men who are needing that.
Brilliant.
And I know that there's other resources, and I'll be more than happy to put those in the show notes as well for those, especially for men who really need a place to talk. I really hope this reaches the right people today. Thank you for coming
Yeah,
on.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great talk.
It
Of
is an
course.
amazing talk. And if you are a male and would like to contact us, you can reach us at 12 looking through THRU 34 theglass@gmail.com. You can you can remain anonymous. You don't need a name to the story for it to have an impact. Completely respect you on that. You can reach us at our Facebook or anything else. And thank you once again for looking into the glass.